Good evening, everybody. We left off on page 318. She ate quickly and gave Neil a quick update on how Connor was doing. Then she went upstairs and spent a little time with the kids. They were desperate for her attention and competed with each other the entire time. "I redid my bookshelves, Mummy," Aiden told her, and guided her in by her hand to show her his room. He had taken everything off of his bookshelves and then placed everything back in. This time it was in alphabetical order by title instead of author. "How long have you been working on this, Aiden?" He shrugged. "Since yesterday," he said. "I did a little bit every time I came in." "That's impressive," she told him kindly, and tousled his hair. "Mom, come here, look at this," Patrick called after she had spent only minutes in Aiden's room. They were right over to Patrick's room, and stooped over his shoulders to look in the computer screen. "I made this for you," he said, and clicked on the animation. A little stick figure manually drawn on the computer, with red hair, came into view. She was carrying a box labeled with the word evidence, misspelled and extending outside of the box's bounds. She went into a building with the words handwritten on the top, Chicago PD/Crime Lab. Then she went right into a hand-drawn elevator and tapped her foot until she got off at the right floor. She walked to a desk and put her box down. A text bubble popped up, and the words, "Let's go get the bad guys," appeared on the screen. Then it was replaced with a black backdrop, and the words, "The End" by Patrick O'Malley, blinked into place at the top. "Do you like it?" "I love it, Patrick," she said with a grin. She had found the entire thing incredibly cute. "It's brilliant." "I did it this morning," he said proudly. "It only took me 2 hours." "Well, good for you. You'll be making full-length movies in no time." He grinned at the compliment. Aiden fussed as Kerry held his shoulders. He was getting sick of not being the center of attention. It was even worse when Patrick was the center of attention. "Mummy, will you read us a story? About pirates." "Pirates, huh?" Kerry asked, looking at her watch. "I think if we make it short, I could manage that. Nothing like a good pirate story for a rainy day. You go pick it out, Aiden. You'll be able to find one in no time now that you've reorganized your books." He grinned and ran back to pick a story. Patrick looked at his mom. "Is Dad feeling any better?" "He's feeling a bit better. It's going to take some time, honey. A few days before you can see him, and then a few months before he's feeling himself again." Patrick nodded. "I know," he said. Kerry smiled at him. "So, it was pretty scary in the grocery store, huh?" "Uncle Neil took care of it," Patrick said, but his tone told Kerry that he was minimizing his feelings. "It's not much fun right now, with all this going on, and with dreams at night," Kerry said knowingly. "But don't worry, honey. This'll pass, and we'll take a nice vacation when it does. In the meantime, you can talk to me, or Uncle Neil, or Grandma and Grandpa whenever you want. And in a little while, you'll be able to talk to Dad." He nodded. "Okay," he said. There was so much he wouldn't tell her. So much that, at this age, a boy didn't want to admit to anyone. She understood that he wouldn't tell her every time he had a gas pain anymore, but she still wished he would communicate at a time like this. She didn't get to say much more because Aiden came bounding into the room, carrying a book entitled, Pirates of the Planet Proton. Kerry chuckled. "All right," she said with a smile. "Want to do this in Aiden's room or in here?" "Here," Patrick said, spinning in his desk chair to face her and his brother. "Okay," Aiden said reluctantly, and sat down on a beanbag nearby. Kerry flipped through the book, seeing that it had pictures. She positioned herself accordingly, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "Okay," she said with an enthusiastic smile. She showed them the first picture and read the words. She knew Connor usually did voices when he read stories, and that the kids loved it. She did her best, but knew she wasn't nearly as good. When she was done, the kids smiled and Aiden commented, "I always like that one." "I like the part where Captain Electron makes Captain Nucleus walk the plank," Patrick said, "and then Captain Nucleus swims to the nearest island and finds that invisible rocket." "I like that too," Aiden said. "It's cooler when Captain Nucleus flies the invisible rocket to the Proton Moon." "And finds all the treasure," Patrick agreed. "That's awesome. The asteroid field was really cool." Kerry hated to leave them now. She wanted to hear them talk about Captain Nucleus and cartoons and video games. She wanted to forget that Connor was in the hospital and that Smith was still out there. But she knew she couldn't do that. She stood up and handed the book back to Aiden. "You're not leaving," Patrick whined. "I'm afraid so," Kerry told him. "But you just got here," Aiden protested. "Block the door, Aiden," Patrick ordered. Aiden ran up to the door and extended his arms across it. Kerry laughed. "I'm sorry, guys, but Daddy's going to get lonely if I don't go back." Patrick frowned, and Aiden let his arms drop. "When are you coming back?" "Probably tonight," she answered him with a smile. She pulled him into a hug, and Patrick joined in. "You two be good for Uncle Neil until then. When you get bored, just ask him to read you stories and play games. That's what he's here for, guys," she told them. "He's here to play with us? I thought he was here to make sure the house doesn't burn down," Patrick said. Kerry smiled. "That too," she said. She gave them one last hug, and then walked downstairs. She said goodbye to Neil, and that she would call him soon, and then she left with Agent Jorge. On the way to the hospital, and almost all the way to Connor's room, she talked to Justin about the case. They were making some progress, and it was going much faster now that the FBI was helping them search for Smith. Now even Justin knew about this plan that Anderson and his buddies had hashed out, but no one wanted to say anything over the phone, which was understandable. The anticipation was making her eager to get Connor moved out of the ICU and for her to get back to the office. Kerry spent the rest of the day at her husband's side. Her parents went to her house to be with Neil and the kids, and brought the game Heroes of the Sky 2 with them. It had only been released in Europe, so the kids were extremely excited to play it. At about 1900, while Connor slept and Kerry read over a report about Tejada planning to attack Chicago, Connor's heart monitor started beeping faster. Kerry looked up. "Connor?" Connor didn't respond, but the monitor steadily increased. His blood pressure was rising as well, and he was breathing irregularly. The FBI agents seemed to snap to attention. Kerry paid them no mind, though. Her hand went straight for the call button on Connor's bed. She then took Connor's hand and rubbed the back of it with her thumb. "It's okay, Connor. Just breathe," she told him, trying to keep the intense worry out of her voice. He was still unresponsive. Dr. Morton and a Dr. Kerry didn't recognize, and a nurse burst into the room. Dr. Morton took one look at Connor's vitals and said, "Let's get an oxygen mask on him. Put the shock pads on just in case. What do you see here, Parson?" While the nurse worked, the younger doctor rattled off some terms. Kerry only recognized half of them, but that was enough. She had a fair idea of what was going on, especially when the younger doctor said the words, "diastolic heart failure." "Very good," the doctor said, and nodded to the nurse. She brought out a syringe and injected Connor's IV with its contents. He finally woke up, and his eyes betrayed his pain and fear. His vitals started to return to normal. "He had a heart attack?" Kerry asked, trying not to become too frantic. "He was starting to, but we stopped it from continuing," Morton assured her. "The drug we just injected should take care of it. Though we're not exactly sure why it occurred, it was probably because of the stress on his heart due to the combination of his injuries and the surgery, though it could have been due to brainstem damage," Morton informed, never taking his eyes from the vital screen. "This is why he's in ICU, so he can catch these things." Kerry, Morton, Parson, and the nurse all watched as Connor's vitals returned to normal. Connor's eyes shifted from Morton to Kerry, and Kerry smiled down at him reassuringly. Then she looked at Dr. Morton. "Will this happen again?" she asked. "When will we know for sure what caused it?" "I'll get right on that. And no, it shouldn't happen again. That drug will regulate his blood pressure and heart rate for at least the next 48 hours. We were planning to move him out of ICU tomorrow morning." Kerry raised an eyebrow. "He just had a heart attack. You can't move him out of ICU." She never let go of Connor's hand and continued to ignore the onlooking FBI agents. Dr. Morton smiled kindly as he said, "As far as we know, Connor's in great pulmonary shape. No history of heart problems. We're going to watch him carefully, but heart attacks are not as dangerous as they used to be. Most of the public doesn't realize that in the last 30 years, heart attack fatality has gone down to less than 1%. Heart failure is not a reason to keep him in the ICU, but brainstem damage is. We'll have to determine exactly what was the cause of this before we move him." Kerry took the information in and nodded. "All right," she said slowly. She looked down at Connor, still holding his hand. "Any other surprises you'd like to tell me about?" she asked Dr. Morton. There's always a chance of complications. He's in ICU for a reason, Lieutenant, but he's going to fully recover. Kerry looked at Morton as if to say, I'll hold you to that. Okay, she said audibly. Parson, we want to keep the oxygen mask on for another 10 minutes, and if his vitals remain stable, we'll put him back on the cannula. If not, call me, and we'll get the respiratory therapist and a cardiac nurse down here. The younger doctor nodded, and shifted his position so he was closer to Connor. Call me if anything else comes up, Dr. Morton said. With that, he and the nurse left. Parson looked down at his attending physician's patient. Mr. O'Malley, does your chest still hurt? Connor shook his head. That's good. That means the drug is working. Did you understand everything that was said? Connor nodded. Excellent, Parson said with a smile. The nanites in that drug will stay in your system for 48 hours to make sure they're done with their job, and you shouldn't have any heart problems again unless you develop high cholesterol. And your medical records say that it doesn't run in the family, and that you eat healthily, so it shouldn't be a problem. Connor nodded, and Kerry smiled. Parson was quiet, now watching Connor's vitals. They stood in silence for a few minutes before Parson asked, Are you in any other pain, Mr. O'Malley? Connor shook his head. The morphine's taking care of it, Kerry explained. Good, Parson said. Another few minutes passed. Well, Mr. O'Malley, it looks like we can take this oxygen mask off and pull the shock pads off your chest. You won't be having any more heart problems. Parson proceeded to remove the shock pads and oxygen mask, and then he replaced the mask with the cannula. He secured it around Connor's ears, and then snapped his hospital gown in the front. Is there anything else I can get you? Connor shook his head. No, I'm all right, he said, his voice hoarse. He then turned to Kerry and smiled. She smiled back. I'll leave you two alone. Parson looked at the FBI agent staring at them. Well, sort of alone. Thank you, Connor said as Parson left. God, Connor, you scared me, Kerry told him, giving his hand a squeeze. I'm sorry, he responded sincerely. The rest of the evening went smoothly. Connor slept through most of it, and Kerry's parents showed up briefly. They went home around midnight, and Kerry fell asleep on the chair beside Connor's bed. We'll read more tomorrow.